We're talking today with Mathias Mapes-Pearson of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, so begin with some background. Where and when were you born?
I was born July 16th, 1995 in Burlington, Vermont.
All right, and how long did you live there?
We were only there for about a year, and then my family moved to West Michigan.
Okay, and then did you grow up in West Michigan then?
Yep, I grew up in Rockford, Michigan for all my life. Went to Rockford High School.
Okay, and what were your parents doing for a living when you were growing up?
My mom is a high school teacher and professor at East Grand Rapids High School and Grand Rapids Community College, and my dad works for Wolverine Worldwide as a software business, kind of like runs supply and demand for our system.
Okay, something that pays decently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And where did you go to high school?
I went to Rockford High School.
Okay, and when did you graduate?
2013.
Okay. Now, you were pretty young when 9/11 happened, but what do you remember about that event?
I remember everyone was really scared. I was in first grade, and my mom picked me up from school early that day. I remember everyone was running around and was scared. I didn't quite understand why at the time. I didn't learn until a few years later exactly what was going on. But I thought it was kind of a free day off from school. So. Okay.
Now, as you were getting older, though, we had wars going on in Afghanistan and Iraq. And did you pay any attention to them by the time you got into high school?
Before high school, not really. We did a little bit in middle school and stuff, and I didn't quite understand why everyone hated Saddam Hussein and other people like that so much. And like most Americans at the time, I actually did believe that Saddam Hussein had something to do with 9/11. But I didn't pay attention much to the wars. I would watch like documentaries on 9/11 and the planes hitting the towers growing up at National Geographic and Discovery Channel when they would put them out, usually around the anniversary.
Okay, so how did you wind up going into the military?
I was coming out of high school and I really didn't enjoy school. I struggled in high school academically and just wasn't a good fit for me. I wasn't focused and I didn't really want to do it, and I also didn't, on the flip side, want to be a guy that just sits in his hometown, works, and is there forever. So for me, the military was kind of the best option. I had a close friend of mine that I played rugby with in high school that was joining the military, and he came from a military family, and he suggested I talk to a recruiter and liked what he had to say and brought home my parents.
Okay, and then which service did you join?
The United States Marine Corps.
Okay, and why did you pick them?
I knew of the Marines growing up. I kind of knew the prestige and kind of we're kind of better than everyone mentality they had, kind of more discipline and stuff like that. And I didn't talk to any of the branches. And so when I heard what the Marines had to say, I liked what they had to say, and I decided that was what I was going to do. Okay.
Now, when you were first talking to the recruiter, were they offering you options for what kinds of training you could get, or how did they present things?
He made you pick certain traits from almost like a deck of cards that had words on them, and then you would kind of sift through them and figure out where he thinks you would fit. They obviously had quotas for certain jobs that they still had to push you towards. But I told them at first I wanted to be an MP when I first went in. But unfortunately that quota at the time was full, and the best they could give me was security forces. And so he offered that you can go do security forces for 2.5 years and get solid training, actually get better promotions, and then you'll go to the infantry for 2.5 years.
Okay. So what's the difference between security forces and military police?
So military police are strictly base guards, and they run like the base security of running the checkpoints, stuff like that, and respond to issues on base. Security forces is a group that was created in the 80s that was used to forward deploy in certain situations around the world to strategic locations to reinforce embassies if they want extra security or need help.
Okay. So you're one kind of step past. So you're doing things that are equivalent of what Marine Guards would traditionally do at embassies? Or...
Yeah, we would reinforce them, and they. But mine, Marine Guards, there's only I think like half a dozen of them at each embassy. We had a platoon of 32, and we were fully equipped with squads and. We were infantry Marines at heart, but then we also had later on training that allowed us to be in a fixed site type of environment.
All right. And so when do you actually go in?
I actually leave for boot camp in September 2013.
Okay. And where do you go for boot camp?
I went to San Diego, California.
Okay. Now, how did they get you there?
I flew from Detroit, Michigan straight to California. I went through the MEPS process in Lansing, and then they send you to Detroit, and they fly you out, and then you land, and as soon as you get off at the airport, you get picked up by buses, and they bring you to the, there's an area, the USO right outside there. They bring you to there, where you mill around until the drill instructors show up, and then they put you on a bus, and then the boot camp begins.
Okay. What time of day was it that you actually got on the bus?
When you got on the, to go to boot camp or to go...
To go to boot camp, from the airport, yeah.
It was maybe 9 o'clock at night, something like that. It was dark out, I remember that. It was about 9 or 10.
All right. Now, once you get on the bus, what happens?
You're told to put your head between your knees and not to look up, no matter what. And supposedly they drive around in circles to kind of disorient people because the airport is literally right next to the MCRD right there. So supposedly they do that. I don't quite remember how long the trip was, but yeah, you just put your head down and wait for the bus to stop.
Okay. And when the bus does stop, then what?
Drill instructor comes on, he'll give you a set of instructions that you're going to yell everything you say, you're going to move quickly, and you're going to refer to them as sir and ma'am, and then you're going to get outside and stand on yellow footprints, and then you'll be given another set of instructions, and then he says go, and everyone gets up on their seats as fast as possible. Okay.
Now the recruits on the bus, were there some women there, or... Because women Marines, I guess, go to Paris Island normally.
Yeah, no, but we still had some women there that were personnel there, so if you ever encountered them, whether they were officers of some kind or something like that. But no, at my time there was strictly men. It was all men there.
Okay. And then what kind of processing do you go through?
You're up for about 24 to 48 hours. After you get there, you are constantly, you get your hair cut, they go through all your stuff, you call your family and tell them that you made it there safely, and then you'll contact them through a letter at some point, and then you start getting issued your gear, you start getting put into basically your holding platoon for a week, where they'll kind of get you a little bit acclimated to what military life is about to be like, and it's a long 24 to 48 hour process where you don't get sleep, you're up the entire time doing something.
Okay, how much of that were you expecting?
I was expecting some sleep deprivation. The initial start, I didn't quite expect it to be quite so constant. I thought they would get tired and we would get breaks, but you don't, and it was constant. I mean, you were just trying to fill out paperwork with no sleep is a difficult process to do.
All right, and then are you doing any kind of tests, or did they do all that already before you got there?
They did all that at MAPS. They do all your blood work, make sure everything with you is healthy. You eventually do, once you get to your platoon, you do your physical fitness tests and stuff like that. And that's when they start keeping track of who needs more work at PT and who doesn't, who can manage themselves and stuff like that.
All right. So now, how is the boot camp set up? How long is it? Does it have phases?
It's 3 months long, and there's 3 phases. It might be 4 now. First phase is just drill, and it's constant, and it's you're building that discipline, and they're teaching you how to be a Marine. That you're one together. You can't do everything on your own and stuff like that. And the drill instructors are with you all the time, 24/7. They will never leave your side. There's always one that is up and around with you. And they're not set up, called Fire Watch and the squad base, stuff like that. And you're with them the entire time, and it's a lot of physical training, breaking you down, and constantly getting yelled at, working with your rifle and all that stuff. Then the second phase, they start to build on that. They teach you about your uniforms, and you go through rifle quals, stuff like that. And you start going through the obstacle courses, and you start doing martial arts and stuff like that. And so they start building what the basic Marine needs to be. And then the third phase is the kind of culmination of everything. You do your rifle range and your qualification, and then you do a qualification for your TAM belt for your martial arts, and you do your final drills and inspections and stuff like that. And then at the last bit of it, you have the Crucible, which is a 3-day long event where you basically essentially are sleep deprived and food deprived for 3 days while you do various events that Medal of Honor recipients in the past have had to do, and they set them up to build camaraderie and kind of build that Marine. Then you hike a massive mountain or hill, I guess depending on how high you think it is, but You hike that to the edge of the water, and then you finally receive your globe and anchor, and you're officially made a Marine.
Now, is all this at the depot in San Diego, or are you parts of it at Camp Pendleton?
The first phase, and that is at MCRD, and then the second phase and part of third phase is out at Camp Pendleton.
Okay. Now, how easy or hard was all of this for you?
For me, it was fairly easy. I come from a family where it's kind of structured, so I took to authority pretty well. Some other people didn't. And I was already physically fit after playing rugby in high school and stuff like that going into it, so I didn't have any issues with that. The biggest issue I was just constantly getting yelled at and treated like nothing. You know, you do the right thing, you still get in trouble. And I think one of the things I came to hate the most about it was mass punishment. When one guy messes up, everyone gets punished, and trying to keep people in line and in check within your platoon. But overall, it was a lot more of a mental game than a physical game. The physicalness of it was, they build you to that standard.
Okay. And then how well did the other recruits respond to that? I mean, were there people who wash out or get hurt?
Yeah, you do have some people that end up getting hurt and having to stay. Some people just decide they don't want to do it, and almost that process is longer than going through boot camp. They tell you at the beginning, the quickest way out of boot camp, because you don't want to be there, is to graduate. It's just to get through it and do it. But you get guys that don't want to do it, that, we had one guy that just refused to do anything. And he ended up, I don't know what actually happened to him, they just took him away. But, I mean, they filter out, and even ones that do struggle, they don't let you fall. Like, they'll keep you around unless you physically can't do it, or you just mentally won't do it. But even if you're struggling with certain things, they help you, and you'll graduate if you want to.
Yeah. I mean, in the old days, at least say Vietnam era and that kind of thing, there was a certain amount of physical violence that went along with it too. I mean, the drill instructors officially didn't hit people, but they did. Was that a thing of the past, or was that still around?
Some of it was. I mean, obviously on paper nowadays you can't lay your hands on a recruit, but I know that some instances where if they were being extremely insubordinate, or they were just doing it to cause trouble and just do what they wanted, they would do it, and they would sometimes get their hands thrown on you. But most of the time it was just a guy spitting and screaming in your face. I mean, the amount of times I was spit on in boot camp, it was just, yeah, or had dirt kicked in your face when you're getting IT'd, stuff like that. So it was, there wasn't much physical violence, and even among recruits either, that when they would get mad at each other, I mean, some people would get in each other's faces and get close to fights, but there were never anything too crazy.
Yeah. Now, when you had the sort of mass punishment situation, I mean, would the other recruits kind of get on the guy who had screwed up, or? Yeah,
I was a squad leader in boot camp for a little bit, and they come and go very quickly. But one of my jobs was to make sure my squad was squared away for the next day, and so the amount of times I would have to get my other team leaders in my squad up in the middle of the night to square away one of our guys or two of our guys that didn't get their stuff done and wanted to go to sleep and didn't think anything of it because they were going to get in trouble regardless, but then we all didn't want to get in trouble the next day for it. So we would stay up, whether it's like, you know, tightening pack straps or taping them down, stuff like that. You get crucified for, we would end up having to do it, and so we tried to help them along, but it was just they either got it or they didn't. And some people just, they slip through the cracks and they just never get, and they go through boot camp just messing up the entire time. But drill instructors can't fail them. I mean, for just messing up. I mean, they get the program eventually, but they were not the most stellar Marines coming out of boot camp sometimes.
Okay. Now, did you understand the logic? Did you realize they were trying to break you down and build you up again, or do you just figure that out after the fact?
I think partially both, because when I was part of the delayed entry program beforehand for quite a while, and that whole thing is geared towards getting you to boot camp, getting you ready, the knowledge base and all that stuff. And so we had Marine guys that were in the depth with us that then would graduate boot camp and come back and see us. And they would tell us stories about it and how to do it. They wouldn't tell us everything. You know, it's also the experience of it. But I could see like the change in them and how they carry themselves and stuff. So I kind of understood what the purpose was, and just was a lot of anxiety and stress going through it. That wasn't so much fun. Okay,
so you get through the first 3 months. Now what happens to you?
I actually got out I graduated boot camp at a really good time. It was right before Christmas, and so they gave us, you get 10 days of leave right afterwards, and so it just worked out that the leave blocks for the Marine Corps right then. And so since you're technically Marine, you rate those leave blocks with the New Year and Christmas. And so ours got extended. I think I got extended like 2 weeks or something like that, to be with my family and stuff. But then January 3rd or 4th, I flew back to California into Camp Pendleton, and there I went to School of Infantry.
Okay. And what was that like?
That was hard. That was 3 months, and that was difficult. I was learning how to truly become a grunt. I mean, boot camp, you get some taste of that by living in the field, but the infantry school is a lot different. The other MOSs that aren't combat related go through MCT for a month long, and ours is 3 months. And I would say about probably 10 weeks out of those 12 weeks is spent you live in the field.
Okay.
2 weeks is about classroom training and stuff like that, and then the rest is you're on a range running different types of maneuvers, or you're patrolling, or you're setting learning different things that you need to become an infantryman, and hiking all the time everywhere you go, and just it teaches you how to do the job of being an infantry marine, and it sucks, and you deal with whatever you got to deal with. But I would definitely take it over the East Coast.
Okay. Lower humidity, maybe.
Yeah, not as many swamps or marshes you have to walk through, and I'd rather be dry than wet. And I'll take the desert heat than the swamp and humidity and sand fleas and stuff like that.
Right. Okay. What kind of people were training you there?
They were combat veterans. Three of my instructors both had been to Iraq and Afghanistan. One was a Marine. Was MARSOC. He was MARSOC at the time, and came back and went back through. It's called the HIS list, and it's basically a list that pulls people around the Marine Corps to come be instructors, whether general instructor, recruiter, or combat instructor, and he got pulled to do that.
So the acronym, he was a reservist basically who got called up, or?
No, so he was MARSOC. So with that, he was Special Forces in the Marine Corps, and then he got pulled down to that because he was injured, and then he rehabilitated there, and he told us a lot of stories, and they were all combat veterans, which helped a lot with painting the idea that if you're an infantry marine at some point in your career, you're probably going to be at war, and so they treat you, and they make the scenarios as realistic as they can, and they really make you understand that you're sitting on a hilltop in the middle of California patrolling, and you think it's a fun time, but in reality you're training for what you might have to do in Afghanistan. And they would tell stories about guys back in Iraq and stuff where they would get out of school, their infantry school, and 2 months later they're in Iraq and driving a Humvee or patrolling or whatever they're doing. So it was they tried to paint the scenario as realistic as possible, and they were very good instructors for us.
Okay. What was the kind of hardest or most challenging thing you had to do there?
I think adjusting to the way of life of living dirty and in the field. I very much enjoy a hot shower every day, and so having to clean yourself with baby wipes or eat MREs all the time was probably the hardest adjustment for me. The hikes hurt after a while just because your body kind of breaks down, but it was definitely getting adjusted to what that life was like and what the next 5 years of my life were going to be like, because you are an infantryman, you take pride in that, and so as an infantryman you train like one constantly, and so understanding that living in the field was going to be my way of life for the next 5 years.
Okay. All right. Now, do you get specialized schooling after the infantry school?
Yes. So I went from San Diego. Directly afterwards, I got orders to Chesapeake, Virginia for basic security guard school, which is not the same as what embassy guards go through. They go through a different school. This is called an A152 Security Force Marine. And that schooling was a lot of hands-on with pistols. We were issued pistols, the M10 shotguns, semi-automatic shotguns. We had more extensive work with machine guns, the 249 and 240. And then we had worked through basic procedures of how to run guard mount, how to set up, line up your Marines for guard, make sure they have all their gear, go through all the procedures, all that stuff. How to run a fixed site security, how to, basically how to function as a security officer. And understand that you're going to be entrusted with a lot of power because you're going to be alone most of the time when you're on post.
Okay. Was there much classroom for this, or was it?
It was a lot of classroom. A lot of range time, and a lot of physical training. Because there was a lot of classroom time, they would whoop us. Our we had PT in the morning, and then we would have classroom in the afternoon, or in the late morning and afternoon. And the mornings were always it was rough stuff. It was bear crawls with buddies on your back. I mean, it was constant PT and stuff like that to keep you in shape.
And was this facility just a Marine facility, or were there Navy people there too?
No, it was an actual Navy base. I think it was a communications base, but there were Navy sailors that were there and stuff. It wasn't a very big base there.
Mm-hmm.
And then our school was just there. We literally just had the schoolhouse, the barracks there, and then they had the ranges and stuff like that, and that was all that we had there for our disposal.
And how many of you were going through that program at that time?
There were quite a lot. I was actually in holding for 3 months to get into training there.
Okay.
I graduated from SOI in March, and I didn't get to training for security guard school until about end of May, June, about that. And I was stuck there just waiting, and the hardest part was kind of waiting for your time to come and maintain your kind of physical training, because they can't watch everyone the entire time, so some guys kind of lose their edge after coming from infantry school and aren't in too hot a shape and stuff like that, or don't keep up on their knowledge.
So how did you spend your time while you were holding?
Sometimes you would try to avoid your higher ups and hide out and relax for the day, or they would do like regular classes with us, called kind of like hip pocket classes, where just a Marine that has been in for a while will take a lot of the newer guys and go over things that you've already know, but you need to perfect them over time, and you need to know them. So whether it's weapons handling or how to do some of the training you're about to do, they would give us some of the manuals and stuff like that you're going to need to know to graduate. And so some guys try to hide out all the time, or you just do what they call working parties, where you're helping out around the base, whether you're cleaning the barracks or the bathrooms, stuff like that. So. Okay.
And could you get off base?
We could on the weekends, but you only had an extended amount of time. You were allowed to be gone, and then you had to be back at base. We had formations every Friday afternoon, and then Sunday night there would be a formation that you had to be at.
Okay.
So.
And if you go off base, how did people in the community treat sailors and Marines?
Well, we were, Virginia, that portion of the Virginia, Chesapeake, and then up to like Norfolk is all military. It's the whole area is just one giant Navy base. So a lot of people treat everyone pretty much with respect there. I don't think the civilians in the surrounding area really enjoyed the military, because they usually destroy stuff, or are kind of mean to everyone, or think they're the best. But overall, I mean, I would say the majority of the people that live in that area are all military themselves, so they kind of know how the game's played with dealing with everyone. But I mean, you always get the sleazy car salesman trying to sell you cars, stuff like that, or at the mall trying to sell you crap you don't need, trying to appeal to you. But exploiting the military is something new, nothing new.
Yeah. So they could look at you coming down the street, look at your haircut, and they know who you are.
Yep. Yeah. They know exactly what you're doing. There's been a million guys before you.
All right. So then, when do you actually finish the school itself then?
I finished in July, right before my birthday.
Okay. And what year?
2014.
14. Okay.
Yeah.
So you've been about 9 months at that point, or 10. Yeah. Okay. All right. So you do that, and now what happens to you?
After graduation, my next unit, platoon sergeant, was actually at our graduation, and Charlie Company and Alpha Company Fast were housed together in the middle of Norfolk at a place called Camp Pendleton, and I think it's condemned now and gone. Condemned when we were there, but anyway, so he was there, and he loaded the guys that were picked for Fast for those 2 units, loaded them on a bus, and we went there and we did our in-doc process, where we process all our paperwork. We do our audit of what unit we're with now and all that kind of stuff. Got issued our rooms, and then the next following days we got issued our gear from there, stuff like that. And then my unit was rebuilding essentially my platoon, and so they had just gotten the platoon sergeant, a few NCOs, and they were still kind of gathering us from the training house.
Now explain what FAST is.
FAST, stands for Fleet Antiterrorism Security Team, and it was created in the 80s, and their job was to deploy to strategic locations to reinforce embassies. So my area for Alpha was Roda, Spain, and our area of operation was Europe and Africa. Charlie Company went to Bahrain, and they were kind of the Central Asian step there in the Middle East, and then we had a company in Japan, and they did Asia.
Okay. Now you were talking. Your company is rebuilding. Why are they rebuilding?
Our company wasn't rebuilding. It was just our platoon. Sorry.
Okay.
Just our platoon was rebuilding, and so how it works is the platoons rotate out through Spain, and there's 2 platoons at Spain at all times. But there's like 4 or 5 platoons back in Norfolk, and they constantly are in training, and they're constantly rotating out and moving around. And so our unit just got done. The guys that just finished their deployment were now PCSing to their infantry units. Okay. So we were replacing them, and so the unit at the time barely existed. There was maybe just a handful of us that were in it, and so over the next few months, I got there in July, and September is when our training started, really kicked off. So for those 2 months, we would PT with our NCOs, get to know our NCOs, and they would kind of train us on what we're going to need to know soon. Mm-hmm. But during that entire time, we were getting guys that were behind in training that I knew that eventually caught up to me, or guys that were from the schoolhouse that were in classes behind me that got orders to our unit, and so we were constantly getting an influx of guys. And then by September, we had our platoon of about 30-35 guys that were going to be that was going to be our family for the next 2 years. Okay.
Now, when you're training with this group, what are you doing with them that's different from what you've had already?
This training was much more specialized. Once we started in September, we immediately went to non-lethal course, which was riot control techniques. You work with riot shields, you work with non-lethal ammunition from shotguns, M203s, all that, and then they also use the spike ball grenades, which are not fun to get thrown at you. And on top of that, we also got OC sprayed, which is the most painful experience I've ever had in my life. After that, we went to Advanced Urban Combat School back in Chesapeake, Virginia, which is where I was at. And there we shot more rounds in my entire Marine Corps career than I ever have. The entire week from sun up to sundown. We got up at like 4 in the morning to be at the range by the time the sun came up, and we didn't stop shooting until the sun went down, and you shot all day, all the time. And it was just constant rotations of close quarters shooting, and then you did house clearing, and then we did live ammunition house training, and stuff like that, which really helped kind of build a lot of cohesion in the unit. And it's very nice when everyone's on the same page and understands the training and knows what's going on to make it look fancy. After that, beforehand, I was very good at PT, and I was really good with my knowledge. I was selected before that to go to Designated Marksman School, and there were only 4 of us out of our platoon that got selected to go to that, and that was directly after Advanced Urban Combat School in November. My unit was in the field training, and we went to Designated Marksman School in Dam Neck, Virginia, which is a special forces like Navy SEAL base there. And we were trained there under a bunch of snipers that had served in Afghanistan and Iraq, and they you weren't a sniper, and they made sure you knew you weren't a sniper. But it was only a month long. I think sniper's course is like 6 or 7 months long. But it was only a month long, but they trained you like your sniper. They taught us how to make ghillie suits, how to stalk, how to precision style shoot, how to be able to shoot, with the wind, stuff like that, how to make adjustments like that. And we shot up to about 1,000 yards away. And our weapon system was the M110 SAS, which is a semi-automatic scout sniper rifle that the scout snipers used. But you ran everywhere with a pack on your back. You learned how to crawl on the beach, water, all that stuff, through the swamps and all that. That's probably the best course I ever went through in the Marine Corps. And then after that, once I was a DM, that's when my weapon system changed to that in the actual unit itself. I would carry an M4 with me, but I would also have the M110 with me.
You said you were a DM.
Yes.
Designated Marksman?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And now, by the time you get through all of that schooling, what date roughly are we at?
Through that, so non-lethal was September, and then Advanced Urban Combat was October, and then Designated Marksman School was November. And so November of 2014, it was right after Thanksgiving, right before Thanksgiving we finished. And then directly after that is when we were getting ready for our 4-month deployment to Cuba.
Okay.
So.
All right. Do you get off for the holidays in there anywhere?
We did. We got off for Thanksgiving, and I got to go home for the allotted time they gave us, and they accompanied the, I think it's a 96 you get with the with our pre-deployment leave for that, and so they gave us, I think, only a week off, so I got to go home for a week and get ready for my first deployment.
All right. So Cuba, how do you get down to Cuba?
We chartered straight from. There's an air base that's right next to Norfolk. There, we got on a plane there and flew straight to Gitmo. There's a landing strip on the other half of the Guantanamo Bay. Yeah.
Civilians, yes. Okay.
On the other side there, and yeah, we got on a ship once. Then we got on a little boat there. It ferried us to the main side of the base.
All right. And what's your first impression of Guantanamo?
It was hot, and I didn't realize it was. There were two sides of the bay. I thought we only owned half of it, but it was a lot more kind of built up than I thought it was. I thought it was kind of there wasn't going to be much there, but I mean there was a whole giant, massive gym there, bars, everything. I mean there was a lot on that base. But other than that, I just noticed it was really hot and it was nice because it was winter back in Virginia and it was kind of cold and rainy, so I enjoyed the weather.
Okay. And so, what do you actually do while you're at Guantanamo?
Our job there was to guard the perimeter fence line. Part of our basic security guard training was to be able to stand posts, and we guarded the fence line between the Cubans and the base itself. And these massive towers. I mean, my tower's probably 100, almost 200 feet up in the air on a bluff. And it would basically your job was to track, and you kept a logbook. You kept track of the Cubans' movement, stuff like that. And then you also were look out for Cuban asylum seekers that would try and cross through the fence line. Usually they try to cross around the ocean or through the bay. And that was basically your primary mission with that. And when you weren't on post, you were on post for 8 hours. When you got off, you were on what they call QRF, Quick Reaction Force. And you were basically the quick reaction force for if we got a Cuban asylum seeker, you would drive out and you would have to go deal with that person at that time, and we would run scenarios almost every time you were on it, where one of our NCOs would probably end up being the Cuban asylum seeker, and you have to tackle him. Or trying to fight grown men like that is grown Marines is not the same as you'd have to deal with some starved Cuban.
Why would you have to tackle an asylum seeker?
They want us to search them and stuff like that, and so for whatever reason, the scenarios they would paint us were they were trying to fight us, or they were trying to be dangerous, and they would be swinging logs or throwing rocks at us or trying to run away. And so oftentimes when we were doing these drills, they would just end up tackling the guy into the ground. So.
All right. Was there ever anything that wasn't a drill?
We didn't. No, we didn't have anything really crazy happen. They had at one time. It wasn't quite a BMP. It was like a Soviet-style gunboat truck thing that they had driving at one point, and that caused an alarm for the base because they drove that right next to the fence line. But other than that, we didn't have any asylum seekers while we were down there. We were only down there for 4 months.
Okay. Now, were there Cuban military personnel on the other side looking at you?
Yep, the Cubans, just like, I don't know who built the towers first, but the towers usually look directly in front of each other. And you had big old binoculars on post, so you would look at them all day, and they would look right back at you, and you knew when their chow trucks came and brought them food every day, and they knew when ours came, and they probably logged it just like we did, so it's very structured.
All right. And then, did you ever get sent anyplace else during those 4 months, or were you just there the whole time? We
were there the whole time. There was another platoon that was down there with us, and they would we would rotate on post. So 1 week we would be on post and we would be doing everything, running the base, and then the next week the other unit would do, and then that week you're not doing post, you're training in the field. So,
is there field training at Guantanamo?
There's a little bit. There's some abandoned buildings we would use, and then you would do other training like rifle range, stuff like that, and PT a lot, and stuff like that. And then you would get 1 or 2 weekends off a month. So every time you were off, you got the weekend off after that. And so those were times where I got to go like spear fishing, and you got to go swimming and stuff like that. And then they had pools and gym and stuff like that you could go to. And if you could drink, which most of us couldn't because we were 19 at the time, there were bars there that you could go to.
All right. What did you think of the leadership in your company?
I really liked my leadership. We actually went. I liked my leadership when we left Cuba. When we first got there, we went through a platoon sergeant who had to deal with some hazing incidences and tried to cover it up in our platoon.
Mm-hmm.
And he ended up getting caught by our captain. We didn't have lieutenants at the time. We had captains for us, which was a little bit different from the rest of the Marine Corps.
So the platoon was commanded by a captain?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think they do that because you go to embassies if you get deployed, and so they kind of want someone that has a little more expertise and experience in time and grade there, versus a fresh lieutenant. And then you generally have a pretty senior staff sergeant, which is what ours was at the time. But he tried covering up an hazing allegation within the platoon, and he disappeared really quickly. And then we had another guy come in who was going to deploy with us to Spain.
Okay. Was hazing an issue in the Marine Corps at that point?
Yeah, I would say a lot. Our NCOs would some were worse than others. I mean, some were just kind of sadistic with it, and they ended up getting in trouble too when the whole hammer came down, and they ended up going away too and getting kicked out of the Marine Corps. But there were small things where you just have to do a lot of PT and stuff like that. It was kind of like almost a little bit of kind of boot camp thing with it. But some of them were like they would hit guys, or one instance was these guys were drunk and they smashed these bottles in front of this guy's room, and then woke him up and made him clean it up, and then dumped a beer all over his rack and where he sleeps. And it was just stupid stuff like that. That's just, you just don't get why people do it. It's just kind of a power thing, I guess. So they went away, but after that we really didn't have any hazing. I think the other NCOs that were in our platoon learned really quickly that if everyone's got to be on the same page, you know.
Okay.
So
anything else about the stay in Guantanamo that kind of stands out for you?
We had to search for a dead guy at one point. It was in the news that the base commander right there, I guess, was sleeping with a contractor's wife there, and then he ended up dead floating in Guantanamo Bay. And so that was, we had to search for him at one point when we were on Liberty, which was not fun because we all got called back and had to go literally just walk through the countryside of Guantanamo Bay looking for this guy that we didn't know who he was and stuff. But other than that, it was pretty uneventful. It was actually pretty nice. It was a lot of time you got to work on your discipline, and you were alone in a box for 8 hours a day with a loaded pistol and loaded rifle, and as a 19-year-old, you're expected not to shoot, you know, at another foreign person that's at an international border, and so it made us become very disciplined in what we did.
Because you have to stay alert at that point.
Yeah, yep. And we were there 24 hours a day, and so I was a day shift, so I actually got the better shift, which was nice because the weather was nice. But at night, I mean, it's pitch black. I mean, you have a red light up there that you can use, but you're alone in the dark for 8 hours. So.
All right. Did you get false alarms?
No, not really. The only thing that would happen was someone would call out a vehicle that you had like a list of vehicles that were kind of like higher alert if you saw them on the Cuban side, and some guys would call out what they think they saw, and everyone would kind of scramble and figure out what's going on, and then NCO or a captain would come out and look at it and stuff like that. So.
All right. Okay, so 4 months there, and is Roda, Spain the next stop?
Yes. We got back in March. And then directly after that, we started our training again for, we did like VIP training with Humvees, which is an experience in itself, trying to, basically you have to guard the van with these Humvees, but it was kind of like you have to practice going from like an embassy to where the ambassador would live, maybe out in town or something like that in a city. So you have to protect both locations. So we had to train to transport him there while also protecting his residence there, but then also protecting the base itself, or the embassy itself there. So we had a lot of training with that, a lot of training with fixed security, and then we went to our evaluations where we were evaluated both by our company and then the regimental level. And those ones were big exercises where they had role players and everything like that, and every type of scenario, riot scenario, sniper scenario for the designated marksmen's, drone scenario, I mean everything. All these scenarios prepare you, and then you pass, and then you get your stuff ready, and you head to Spain.
Okay. Do you fly there, or do you put you on a boat?
We flew charter through Virginia, the same airstrip we took off from Cuba, and then we landed in Roda, Spain. It was like 2 or 3 in the morning. So.
Okay. And what was the duty there like?
It was really relaxed. You have 2 platoons there, and just like in Cuba, you have one that's on call, and then you have one that is training and or doing things for liberty. And it was a very relaxing deployment. It was we only got put on alert for the Paris bombings in 2015. That was the only time we ever got put on alert. The rest of the time, there were never ever any times. And we paid attention to like the news and stuff like that to check out what was going on in our areas. But overall, we trained a lot. We trained just infantry tactics because we knew after that deployment, our NCOs knew after that deployment that we would all be going to infantry units. And by that time, you're an NCO pretty much by the end of your time in that unit, because you get extra points being in security forces to be promoted. And so you know that you're probably going to be a team leader or a squad leader when you get to the infantry. And so if you don't know your stuff, a lance corporal is going to be in charge of a corporal in the infantry, and that's not a good look, and it makes you look bad if you're not leading Marines as an NCO. So we spent a lot of time there working on land nav, working on patrolling, working on everything, the basics of the infantry, because the last year and a half you haven't been training with those. You've been training with, oh, I need to go to a certain area, I'm going to put up C wire and barbed wire, and I'm going to defend this perimeter, and that's what you've been trained to do. But yeah, Spain was a lot of drinking. I played rugby there on the Navy team against Spanish leagues and stuff like that, and met a lot of Navy sailors there. Became good friends with them, and yeah, it was a very
Now here you could go off base. Like Guantanamo, I guess you couldn't really go off base.
Yes, yeah. Here we could you could actually put in special liberty if you were trusted enough to go, and you could actually take leave at times when you were off rotation. To go to places around Europe if you wanted to. No one really did, maybe because I don't think we really necessarily had all the money to do so or really wanted to. But guys, yeah, Thursday nights people would go out and get drunk out in town. I mean, it was if you're not on rotation or on call, then you can essentially do what you want as long as you're.
Okay, but there's a town there. It's not.
Yes, yeah. Roda, Spain's a very big beach town for the Spaniards, and they we were there in the summer, and that place is nuts in the summer, but by the time when we left in November, it was like a ghost town usually. And so, but yeah, it was a big town, and I mean, you have the Strait of Gibraltar right there. I saw the bridges and stuff there. Now we would travel around a little bit too with the Navy team when they would go play rugby and stuff. So I got to see a little bit of southern Spain. But other than that, people just drank and hung out and played video games, sports, stuff like that. So.
All right. Okay. And then, so now you go back home again and then start preparing for the next deployment?
Yep. Right at the end of Spain is when everyone got orders of where they were going. And originally I was supposed to go to 17 out in 29 Palms, California. But I wanted to stay on the East Coast, and I had a buddy of mine that had family in California and really wanted to go back there, and he got stuck with the East Coast. And so, since we were essentially on paper the same Marines, you have the ability to switch orders. And so we were able to do that, and I got orders. We got back in November, and I didn't leave for my next unit until about March. And we saved up our leave, and you get PCS leave, and you can take up to a month off. Which I took, I think, 3 weeks off, and I was home for 3 weeks before I went to my next unit.
Okay, but in the meantime, did you spend time on another base, or?
Nope, we were back home, or back in Norfolk, and we would help out train the next units by like playing as role players, stuff like that. But the majority of the time was you were just getting ready for your next unit. You were doing what you needed to do personally to get yourself ready.
All right, okay. And so what unit do you join then?
I ended up going to 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines in Camp Pendleton, North Carolina.
Okay. When you come into that unit, were they also in the process of rebuilding and rotating people in and out? They were.
They were really low on NCOs at the time when I first got there. I think there were only probably like 8 of us in the entire our entire company, and there's 3 platoons, so there's not many of us for each platoon. And they were still getting guys that were fresh out of infantry school that went straight to the infantry. And they were getting guys, and it was our job to take them and help process them into the unit and start kind of training them and building our camaraderie and stuff with them, and understanding, you know, the guys that you're going to end up deploying with there in about a year and a half. Yeah, you get same thing as the last year. You get all your gear issue, you go through your audit and all that stuff, and you get everything set up so you're ready to be in the unit. And that took, I think it took us about 2 months to get all the guys we needed for our unit.
Okay. And are you training together in the meantime?
Yeah, we would go on field ops. We would go do patrolling on the North Carolina forest, which is a whole other beast. And we would do, they had that whole training regiment set up for us by the division, that you have standards you have to meet as an infantry unit before you can deploy. And so it's very, very structured, and it wasn't as intense as fast is such a short rotation. Where like every month you're doing something. Here you would have some weeks off where you'd have a medical stand down where everyone wants to get their shots or go to dental or, you know, whatever, or like an admin stand down where you're getting everything set up for training, stuff like that, which you didn't have very often in fast. But you were training majority of the time. Every other week or every 2 weeks you were going to the field and doing a range of some kind, or working on marksmanship or whatever tactic you were working on at the time.
Okay. What proportion of the unit had actually gone into a combat zone before?
When I got there, there was only the platoon sergeants, the gunnies, and the first sergeant and the CO. All that higher echelon officers and staff and COs there. It had all been to like Iraq and Afghanistan, and then there were a few NCOs. But the majority of the unit was just like me. They joined after 2013, and they were as fresh as I was when it came to going to a combat zone.
Okay, all right. And now, at what point do you find out where you're going?
We knew first. You know, kind of the deployment prior knows where the next deployment's going. And so at first they were it's called the Black Sea rotation. It's where you have your unit goes to. We had one unit that one company that went to Norway. One company goes to Romania, and then the other one goes to Africa. And my unit was supposed to go to Africa, or my company was. And we had trained all year long in 2016, and we were going through our culmination event, just like in FAST, where you get evaluated at a place where it's called Combined Arms out in 29 Palms, California, and it's like a 6 to 8 week month exercise where you're working with tanks, Amtracs, mortars, artillery, everything, even close air support and stuff like that. And right at the end of that was when General Neller, our commandant at the time, got the word that they wanted to send 300 Marines back to Afghanistan to help train and advise. And we were the unit that was the most ready. And I guess it was kind of cliche that 1-2 was the last combat unit in Afghanistan in 2014 when the Marines left. And so it was kind of, I guess, cliche to be the first, you know, 1-2 is the first unit back to do any type of Marine operations there.
So we had Army personnel over there
Yes.
still, but not Marines.
Yep. Yep, the Army ran everything, along with the ODAs and Rangers ran everything there as well. So we, but the rest of our unit, it was just our company that was going. Bravo Company and Alpha Company of our unit were still going to Norway and Romania. It's just that Romanian force was getting broken in half to help cover Africa as well.
Okay.
And as soon as we found out we were going there, everyone was trying to come to our unit. Everyone in the Marine Corps was trying to come because we were the first Marine Corps unit to go into at least go to a combat zone since 2014, unless you were MARSOC of some kind. And so you had infantry guys from all over trying to get orders to come to our unit, because in the infantry it's kind of a pride thing. You want to go do your job, and so you want to go to war.
So you have morale at a high enough level. You've got people who are willing to go and take the dangerous assignments.
Oh yeah, I would say morale in the Marine Corps is, at least in the infantry, you really aren't anything until you've been in combat in the infantry. And so you get guys that are straight infantrymen that are young and hungry, and they want. I mean, I remember one of the most ridiculous things in boot camp. Me and my buddies were asking each other, like, you know, why'd you join? And I was like, oh, I kind of joined for college, stuff like that. And this guy's like, just straight up told me, he's like, I just want to kill people. And I was like, joined a good place to do it. Glad you're doing it here and not the streets or anything like that. But that's what he wanted. He wanted to be a machine gunner in the Marine Corps and do that. And so you had guys like that all in our unit that they were all gung-ho about it. They wanted to go, and they were excited to go, and they were, you know, I remember my platoon sergeant, who was in Marja in 2010 in the push for Afghanistan. I remember him pulling out cigars, and we all smoked cigars because we found out we were going to Afghanistan, and that was kind of like the best thing that could happen for us at that time. So.
Okay. Now, what do they do to prepare you to go to Afghanistan?
Right afterwards, we got, we had to they kind of described our mission, kind of got centralized for us. You know, at first we didn't really know exactly what we were going to go to do there. We didn't know if we were doing combat operations. They only told us we were taking our company, so we kind of had to hint that it wasn't going to be like heavy combat operations, because you would take the entire battalion if you were going to do something like that. And then it came down that we were doing that we were going to be security for an advisor package that was going there, and so they immediately started shifting that towards kind of what I did in security forces, which was your security, your guarding, and you run posts, you run the base, you have to guard personnel, and so they did rely. A lot of our security force guys were in my unit with me, and they relied heavily on us to help train and kind of describe what you're going to have to do as a security Marine, and so. We did a lot of ranges and fixed site security type of stuff, kind of stuff that we did in security forces. And then we also trained with the advisor group a lot that was going to be with us, and they were all, I don't want to say there was any, well there was probably only 2 lieutenants, and the rest of it was either a captain, major, lieutenant colonel, colonel, master sergeant, gun, you know, all very high ranking personnel that have a lot of experience in different jobs in the Marine Corps. And they were all good people, and we trained with them extensively beforehand. We did big operations in Camp Lejeune, where we would take over an area like the base we were going to be taking over from the Army, and running operations, going through different scenarios like an IED or VBID, trying to blow up our entry control point, or sniper, stuff like that. So.
Okay. So how long did you spend training before you went?
We got the word in November, and then we left in April, so we had only about 4 months to train. Okay. But we still had the basics down. We had gone through ITS, or Combined Arms, and we had done all the training the year prior, the training regiment that an infantry has to go through. So they knew all the basics. It was just getting that kind of security mentality. You know, you're not going to Afghanistan to hunt down the Taliban. You're going there to make sure the Taliban can't touch these advisors that are trying to help out. So, and we had extensive training with like green on blue attacks. You know, a Taliban member infiltrating the Afghan army, getting to the base, and then getting a weapon and trying to kill one of us or another coalition member there. And so we had a lot of training. That was our biggest threat in Afghanistan, was that happening. And the base, when we went to Leatherneck, I can say that story for when we get there.
All right. So you're doing it. So now is it 2015 that you go over?
No, this is 2016 that we had training, and then 2017,
yeah.
April 2017 is when we left.
All right.
I was part of the ADVON package that was sent before our unit got there.
Okay. So you're an advanced party?
Yes.
Essentially. Okay. Now, what's the process for getting you out there?
We flew. My guy, since we were the advanced party, we took a different route, a little bit different route than they did. We went to, we drove to Washington, D.C., and we flew out of D.C. to Germany, and then Germany to Irkutsk, Turkey, the big Air Force base in Turkey.
Incirlik?
Incirlik, I don't know how to say it, but in southern Turkey there, and then Turkey to Kuwait, and then we spent about 2 weeks in Kuwait, just kind of getting acclimated to the desert and kind of finalizing everything with your gear and stuff like that, and figuring out the timeline. And then we flew to Kabul, Afghanistan, and Kandahar, and we stayed a day there at Kandahar Air Base. And then from there we got in Chinook helicopters and flew to Leatherneck in Helmand Province.
Okay, and describe Leatherneck as a base.
It was really big, and it was like a ghost town, because the Afghans, when they took it over, they didn't upkeep the maintenance of it, because they don't know how to. And so you have these giant tents everywhere with just giant holes in them, because the Afghans ripped into them to see what was inside of it, not knowing that they were like $1,000 tents that were actually good for keeping them safe in the desert. But they, it was really run down, except for the portion that we controlled. And then to our north, about a half-mile away, there was an ODA base called Antiterrorism that was just north of us. That ODA team was embedded there with training, with the goal of training a special forces type of infantry unit for the Afghans to have. And so when we flew in, I didn't realize how small our portion of the base was. It was only about 500 by 400 meters that our base was actually a part that we controlled. The rest of it was all Afghan, and they had their own checkpoints and everything around the entire base, and they ran the security into the base as well. But we also had our own security to our portion of the base as well, with cameras everywhere and stuff like that. So.
Okay. And so what are the first couple days like there?
First couple of days we're kind of getting acclimated to it. They took us around and showed us where everything was. They showed us where, like, the indirect fire bunkers were. You know, this is the drill if, you know, we're getting overran or a V-bit hits the ECPs. They would go through the kind of those procedures, show you where everything was, the gym, chow hall, and kind of what the daily routine was. And then after about 2 days, we kind of our highest ranking, our gunny was with us, and he was starting to figure out, okay, what platoon is going to take over which portion of the base, which one is going to be base defense, which one is going to be flight line security, which one is going to be, you know, the advising security, and all these things, and figuring out that. And then once he figured out where everyone was going to go, then he had leadership from each platoon that would then go talk to the Army and work with the Army and figure out how they run operations. So that way, when our unit got there, we could immediately get them acclimated, show them, kind of give them a day or two to get used to everything, and then you start doing what they call the RIP, which is where you're sitting alongside the Army guy doing the same job you're going to be doing for the next 6 months. So.
Okay. All right. And how long does it take for the rest of the unit to show up?
I think we were only there for about 4 or 5 days when they finally got there, and they came in on the flight line on a giant C4 plane, and they unloaded them all, and then they came and it was immediately just, they got them their sleeping quarters and then show them where everything is. They literally had a day or two to kind of acclimate and get used to everything, and then we immediately started getting to our Army counterparts that we were going to be working with for the next week to conduct this RIP, to change roles with them. So.
Okay. And then how does that play out?
It played out well. Some of the Army was not very good. It was an artillery unit that was guarding the base. It was not an infantry unit. It was weird, and they had females there, and some of them did not have the same mindset we did. We were all about, like, hey, anything can happen at any time. Mm-hmm. They have obviously gotten a little complacent and kind of knew how things ran. But I remember being outside. We always had to wear gear when we left the base, our full body armor and helmet, and there was a helicopter pad next to the base Antiterrorism, and a month prior, an Afghan Army soldier that was actually Taliban took a machine gun and shot a bunch of Special Forces guys over there, and none of them died, thankfully, but we saw the guard post where that guy was at, and this Army woman was just hanging out outside with no gear on, calling in this helicopter, and it was just kind of like a mind blowing for me. I was like, that's where the guy shot at everyone, and you're sitting out here with nothing on, acting like nothing's wrong, and we're not in Afghanistan and Helmand Province. You're acting like we're, you know, in California right now. And so that was a little odd to see how they do things, and we kind of changed the procedures up that we didn't like that the Army did, that we thought we could improve. But overall, it went well with them. They taught us everything that they had learned over the previous time that they were there. And they had made a lot of improvements to the base and stuff like that. But
okay. And were you staying on the base while you're training, or do you go off base for anything?
We would go off base. Like, we had one unit, one platoon was flight line security, and so they would go secure the flight line, which would bring in supplies and all that stuff. And then my platoon at first was base defense, and so we ran the helo pad that was next to our base, where we would get supplies, and then personnel would come as well, and so we had to train securing that LZ and making sure the Afghans stayed off it, and, you know, that process for controlling the helicopters and stuff like that, with our base defense operations, and working with the air officer and working with all these moving components at the same time, while also then you guard the base at night, and just running through those procedures of, you know, if someone's trying to come over the wall, you know, if you're being surrounded, or you're being, you know, a V-bit hits the wall and then they're rushing in fighters, stuff like that. You go through all those type of procedures as well with them, and train with them and how they do things. And it was actually kind of odd. We only guarded the posts at night. We had a contracting company called Triple Canopy that had Ugandan nationals that were our base, that would sit in our posts during the daytime. And they would sit up there with a 240 machine gun and their AKs, and they were our base defense during the day.
Okay.
Yeah.
What impression did you have of those people?
I enjoyed them a lot. They were really fun guys. They were a lot of them, as bad as it may sound, a lot of them were child soldiers from Africa, and they just did this job for a living because they made good money, and a lot of them had combat experience fighting Boko Haram in Africa, and they were like they remind me a lot of infantry Marines because they wanted to do a job where they got to defend and kill people, and that's what they had. So they would tell some crazy stories, and that's what they were, and it was wild to. I mean, they were good friends with us, and we really enjoyed them. But it was interesting to have that. And we also had cameras and stuff throughout the entire day. So, and they had handlers too that were American that were in control of them basically.
Yeah.
That were usually retired Rangers or Special Forces, some kind that got into contracting. And those guys were awesome to work with, and they did really well there. But we would still be in charge of base defense throughout the day. We would have an officer in there, and we had massive cameras all around the base that could see for miles around the base, as well as automated 50 caliber machine guns around the base as well. We had 3 of them, one at each ECP, and then one on one of our southern corners that were remote controlled from our base defense area. It was almost like it was just a big joystick, and it was just it was a 50 caliber machine gun that you could shoot from there.
All right. Well, this tape is just about up, so we're going to pause here and reload and rewind. Okay, so we've gotten to the point in your story now where you've made it to your piece of Camp Leatherneck out in Afghanistan and Helmand Province, and the rest of your unit has arrived. What kind of just physical accommodations did you have on that base?
We had a gym. We had Wi-Fi. They had a small USO there. That just had like video games and TVs and stuff that you could use. And then the chow hall, which was actually really good. I don't know what company exactly they contracted for it, but it was pretty good food there. We weren't eating MREs unless we left our portion called Shorab for any extended period of time. There was like a basketball court there and stuff like that, but beyond that, we had our own repair shop there as well for our vehicles.
Okay. So how many Marines were based there? Just you guys, or?
It was just us. There were some Air Force personnel that ran some of the flights there. There was a few Navy and some Army that were there. But I would say overall, I think there was probably only 400, probably 400 actual U.S. service members there. 300 which were Marines, and then there was quite a few number, probably another 50 to 60 civilian contractors.
Okay. And then your Ugandan friends?
Yeah, and then we had the Ugandans there as well. That were probably there was a platoon of them that was probably like 25 strong, and they rotated the posts day and night, 24/7.
All right, and what did you sleep in?
We slept in these big case spans that had. We didn't have AC for the first 2.5 months, and then we got these massive square ones that really made the place cold, which was nice. But the first 2.5 months there, it was hot.
Okay. Well, are you in tents or containers or?
Yeah, they were like half a silo kind of thing that stuck out of the ground. It was a metal half a cylinder that would that had a door on each end and some windows, and that was it. With electricity. So, and then there were racks inside of there that everyone lived on, and then squad leaders inside of that, and platoon leadership like myself, they had plywood walls set up for like rooms, and so the squad leaders would share a room, and then our platoon sergeant, our platoon commander got their own room. Okay.
So were you a squad leader?
I was.
Okay. Yes. All right. So you're middle management, basically.
Yeah, I make sure everything happens is my job.
Okay. Now, once the rest of the unit shows up, and you got these higher-ranking people who are supposed to be the actual advisors or whatever, once they get there, now what are they doing, and what are you doing?
So at first I was base defense, and so what my job was at night I was I would help the watch officer, and at times I was a watch officer, and we ran the base. Anyone coming in or out of the base, we made sure the posts were good. I would tour the posts to make sure they were awake and alert, and their weapon was in good order, and they had all batteries they needed for all their optics at night and stuff like that. We would monitor the cameras in the area as well, and as well as the 50 caliber machine guns that were around the base. And then we were also in charge of the flights that would come in. The air operator with us would tell us when these flights were coming in, And it was our job to make sure our guys were ready to go provide security and get whatever necessary, whether it's a forklift or a truck that carry any cargo coming off of it that we needed. And we did that for about probably about 2.5 months. And then all the platoons rotated except for one.
So during that first phase, did you have any kind of problems develop or interesting situations?
Yeah, since we weren't allowed to patrol, General Nowell actually came and talked to us and told us the worst thing that would happen would be a Marine gets killed here. And I'm like, we're infantry. Like, I understand that it would be bad, but at the same time, it's like everyone here we're doing a job, and so we weren't allowed to patrol the area around Leatherneck that was dealt to the Afghans, and the Afghans didn't do that. And so probably every 2 weeks we would take a rocket attack of some kind from the north. They would shoot off rockets, and then we would send our drones to go find them, and if we found them, we would blow them up, but usually we would just find the site. And they would just launch rockets, the alarm would go off, and you run to the bunker and essentially hope that the rocket doesn't fall on you. Most of the time it always hit the Afghans and would either kill some of them or they would wound some of them. But other than that, we would constantly get the threats that they're trying to bring a dump truck with high explosives onto the base and blow us all up, or they're trying to blow a hole in the wall and flood fighters in from, you know, an Afghan unit they've infiltrated, stuff like that. Which never came to fruition, as much as we really wanted it to kind of come to fruition, because it gave us something to do. But on the other flip side of that, if you didn't have a whole lot to do, that meant you were usually doing your job pretty well with security.
Yeah. So what impression did you have of the Afghan military to the extent that you observed them?
The extent that I observed them to that point was they were not great. They were not very good. They were didn't have much discipline. We're really just doing this job because there was really nothing else to do in the country. Some had some pride, I could tell, but a lot of them would just walk around and fling the rifle wherever, or not even wear body armor of any kind when controlling a checkpoint or something like that. And they just weren't very disciplined, and I mean they didn't have obviously the same type of training that we did, but they didn't really seem like they wanted to be there.
Yeah, okay. So the advisors you're guarding, are they going out off the base and going to other places to work with the Afghans, or?
Yeah. So on the base itself, they had different types of schools set up with some of the Afghans, or with our advisors. Some were like mortarmen, some were regular infantry guys, and we ran some of they're called Kandaks, which is their units. They're their infantry units. We run through them kind of like a sped up boot camp in a sense. They would go through rifle training, how to use mortars and different systems like that. And we would have units that would guard that area. One of our sister unit platoons would guard them. And then they also had like logistics officers and admin officers and intelligence officers that they would go out to different portions around the base and would work with their Afghan counterpart, who's usually an officer. And part of your job, they call it guardian angel duty, which is where you're guarding this officer that is working with this other Afghan officer, and your job is to make sure no one is trying to kill him or bust in the room with a gun to try and kill him, stuff like that. And every day, I'd say we have almost 15 to 20 missions that would go out in different locations around the base, all over the base. That would. Some of them were carrying a lot of advisors. Some of them would just be 1 or 2 advisors, stuff like that.
Okay. But a lot of that work is being done right there on the base because you've got all the Afghans right there.
Yes, all the Afghans there. They have the infrastructure there that we left them, like maintenance bays, stuff like that. And so it's all there. And so they would go around there and conduct those operations with them and work through them, try and work through the corruption that was there, or supply, stuff like that. So.
Okay. So after that first 2.5 months when you're doing base guard duty, what do you do after that?
We rotated, and how it worked was we had 4 platoons. Usually you only have 3 in a company, but we had 4 with some extra guys that we needed for the mission. We rotated to Guardian Angel, and then the Guardian Angel rotated to Flightline Security, and then Flightline Security rotated to Base Defense. And then we had our 4th platoon was in Lashkar Gah, which is the capital of Helmand Province, at a small police base there with a group of advisors that were advising the police and trying to maintain some kind of stability in the capital. And they weren't too far away from us. It was probably like a 15-minute flight by helicopter. But Guardian Angel duty, we assumed the roles, and my personal job was I was a personal security detail to a colonel, which his name was Colonel Gross. I had another Marine with me, and then his interpreter, and he was the highest ranking advisor to the general of the actual infantry unit that was at Leatherneck, and he was a really good general, and he really liked him a lot. And he was a really good non-corrupt general that was trying to really fix Afghanistan. And really try and make progress, and I sat in because I was guarding them a lot of their operation talks on doing different operations in the province, on pushing the Taliban out of certain districts to gain them back that we had once owned back in 2010 to 2014.
Okay, all right. Now, did they go out on any kind of operations with the Afghans, or did they just stay on the base?
We would just stay on the base. Sometimes we would go on what is called expeditionary advisor package, and basically what it was is we sent a very small group of Marines, usually like 25 to 30, to specific locations to help out with either operations or help try and do what we were doing at Leatherneck, which was fixing kind of the Kandak, the infantry unit that was there. So the big one that I went on was to Sing in Afghanistan, and we were there for about a week. Helping, I was guarding them, but we were in right outside the riverbed there, and we were on the base there trying to help fix basically this Kandak that had been there for years and was just basically just decimated at this point. But we went other places around too, like to Marja, a place called Fiddler's Green in the middle of the province, and just different areas where they would go to different districts and work on them. And then they also did run big operations to kick the Taliban out of certain districts and try and hold them as best they could.
All right. Did you have any sense for yourself of how well things were going, or if you were making any kind of progress?
They did make a lot of progress. It was just the idea of whether or not in 6 to 10 months whether they kept it. While we were there, they conducted like 5 or 6 operations where they kicked the Taliban out of certain districts like Nawa and Garmshire and all these other districts around us. And that was relatively easy because the Taliban had kind of figured out that we just run away while the Americans are here. Once it's just the Afghans, we can just kill them because they don't patrol, they don't have the discipline that the Americans have, and so they just wait till we leave or our presence isn't there as well, and then they just go and attack them again. And so we accomplished a lot. I haven't heard a whole lot recently about what was kept, but we did take a lot of districts there and did disrupt the flow of the fighting season by being there and helping them. In terms of like staying in Marja, I don't think we had much of an impact. When they saw us, they really were like happy to see us, and I think they thought like it was going to be like 2010, 2011 again, where we were bringing in thousands of Marines to systematically, take out the Taliban, which we were not there to do. A lot of them were happy to see us, but they were not happy with the fact that we only brought maybe 20 or so guys. And not a whole lot of firepower with, other than drones and Apaches. So. Okay,
so you did the base security, you did the Guardian Angel duty, and then did you rotate into other duties after that?
No, we just switched. Yeah, we just switched back to base defense duty, and we just rotated like that. And it was kind of a good mix. It got you the base defense didn't keep you on base the entire time, so you get super complacent, which was nice. And then the Guardian Angel duty kind of kept you on your toes because you would be out with the Afghans, and that's when really things would happen. Is if you were going to be attacked, it would have been when you were with an advisor, and a Taliban member that disguised himself got a hold of a weapon somehow.
Okay. And did your unit have any incidents like that while you were there?
No, we would constantly be getting intel from our human intelligence guys that were with us about them trying to do it, and they would pick up they call ICOM chatter, which is the little telephones that they like to use there, about them trying to do it. But we had one big attack that wasn't us, but it was a base that was by Lashkar Gah, where it was 4 Taliban put on just regular Afghan uniforms, walked onto an Afghan base and blew up their mess hall, and it killed like I think over 50 Afghan soldiers. And so, I mean, we knew it was a threat, and I mean the march prior to us going there, I mean they had that attack on the base itself by Antiterrorism, where a soldier tried to kill the special forces guys there. So we knew it was a threat, but we never really had any intimate issues with it.
Okay. And did you see much of the civilian population at all?
Not really. There were none on base unless they worked for the government. When we were out in Sangin and Marja, we saw a little bit of the population, and they would just go about their daily lives. I never interacted with them personally because we'd never left really the confines of our area there. But as far as I saw, they went about daily life despite the fact that a war was still going on. I mean, they were women and children just walking around, walking with water, stuff like that. And they usually knew when to hide when they heard gunfire and stuff like that coming off.
Now, when you were out there traveling around, were IEDs a problem there or not?
No, we flew into everywhere we went, and we had some vehicles with us that we would get from the Afghans. They were like these little dingy Ford Ranger things that had no armor on them, that we would ride around in, usually around there. And there were some stretches that they told us to avoid because the Afghans knew that there were IEDs on them. But the majority of it was we would be walking around on an actual Afghan base. So usually IEDs weren't our big threat for us there because if they were there, then someone else probably would have hit them by now.
And you weren't doing road patrols and things
No,
like that?
we weren't. Yeah, we weren't allowed to conventionally patrol like the Army was allowed to for whatever reason. They were allowed to. To the south of us, there was a base called Dwyer that they were at, and we would get calls all the time about them hitting IEDs down there at our base defense, and it was frustrating for some of us. It was like, why does the Army get to patrol and we don't? We're getting shot with rockets. They're not. It was an interesting political kind of concept.
So how long was the total stay in Afghanistan then?
April to October, so about 6-7 months we were there.
All right. Anything else stand out in your memory from that particular stay?
When talking to some of the Afghan soldiers, they would often, I mean, a lot of them had learned English over time from us being there so long. They would ask about your family, and I remember asking one guy about his family, and he mentioned how when he's home, like when he goes on leave and it's not fighting season, he sees his brother there. His brother fights for the Taliban, but he fights for the Army. And when they're home, they're fine, they're friends, they're brothers. But once fighting season kicks off, his brother leaves to go fight, and he is in the Army. And it was just an interesting complex to almost, have a family where it's divided that one fights for, the Taliban, and another one fights for the Army, and, they both fight against each other. And it was interesting. It was also cool to have a lot of very high-key figures come to our base. Like we had General Dunford come to our base. We had a German general that was in charge of all of Operation Freedom Sentinel, which was the operation that we were there with. That's the coalition force. And speaking with them and kind of seeing their different points of view with Afghanistan and listening to the general and kind of see what the Afghan general there, what he saw was the problem. He didn't see that the fight, he understood that just pushing the Taliban out wouldn't work. Just pushing them out of a district, they were just always going to come back. And he would always constantly complain about Pakistan and the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan is very free-flowing. And what he always complained about was how in Pakistan there, the called mujahs, the clergy there, radicalized the youth there, and then in the fight season they're get their weapons and stuff and hop the border to Afghanistan to fight, and that unless you are able to stop that, then the war in Afghanistan is probably never going to end. It was just kind of an interesting insight into as much progress as you want to make. You kind of in the back of your mind were just, you can only do so much. I did my job there, and that was the best I could do. So
all right. Now, when you come back to the States from that kind of situation, do the Marines, they do anything to kind of help reorient you to being, back in this end of the world, or coming off a deployment like that, or they just bring you back and leave you to your own devices?
No, we had some formal training afterwards, kind of, if you needed, treatment of some kind for mental issues, if you had them, or PTSD issues, which I don't know any of my buddies that have any issues there. We didn't get shot at that much there. But I mean, they had resources, stuff like that. But afterwards, you have about a few months where it's kind of, you're winding down, and at that point everyone is starting to leave. It's whether you know, like for me, my example was like I'm getting out, and so I still had close to a year left at that point, a little bit less. And so for me, it was, I can't go to another unit because I don't have time to deploy again with another unit. So I will be staying in this unit, but I won't deploy. But I will help train the next group of people that are, you know, are going to come through and stuff. And it's kind of an interesting mixture you constantly have in infantry. You have the guys that are going to deploy and are training their new Marines, and then you have guys that are essentially waiting their time to get out. They'll help train and they'll do different things for the unit, but they help. They just essentially sit there and basically wait their time. And so at that point, once we got back, everyone was kind of figuring out, okay, am I going to re-enlist? You know, for like my platoon sergeant and officer, which have longer contracts, and they're obviously, some of them were lifers. They were figuring out what unit they're going to go to next, and my lieutenant got orders to go be a platoon commander down at Paris Island and stuff like that. And so, you guys, everyone's doing different things at this time, and all in all, you're also still getting new Marines from Infantry School that you got to start building up. And we trained them initially. We went on some ranges and some field ops with them, but then eventually we started getting the NCOs that were going to be going on the next deployment and stuff like that, and then essentially hand off the reins, being like, here, this is your platoon now, this is your squad now, you need to train with them because I'm leaving in 8 months. Does me no good for them to get used to my leadership style and how I operate when I'm not going on the deployment with them. And so some of it's just sitting around. I mean, you kind of do your own thing and you do your own device, which is nice too because it kind of lets you get to your transition. It kind of lets you set up things.
Now, at some point in your time there, you wind up in Ukraine, don't you? Yeah,
so that was back in Roda, Spain. We part of an operation there was it was basically, it's an annual operation with Ukraine and Moldova in central Ukraine. We're essentially a big training operation, and we were training them, and it was kind of a big deal because it was recently after Putin had invaded Crimea, and a lot of the Ukrainian Marines that we were working with there were right after us. They were going to Crimea to fight the Russian Separatists, and they had veterans there that had fought there before and told us how the Russians operated, and working with them for a few weeks was really awesome. It was cool to it was interesting to see them having to go fight someone that was as powerful as the U.S., and their military is a complete mess. I mean, it's not as bad as the Afghans, but it's not much better. And seeing them try and go fight a superpower was insane, and kind of like the courage that those Marines had, because knowing that a lot of them were probably going to get killed because the Russians were essentially supplying these, separatists, and I still convinced they use unmarked soldiers, but
that seems pretty likely given the full range of available evidence. But they do seem to limit how far they go or what they do. If you look at the size of Ukraine as a whole, but they're still invading somebody else's country.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I was talking to one Marine, and he was. When we would ask him about Crimea, he would start crying because his family was there and he couldn't go visit them. If he went and visited his family, he would get killed, and then they would kill his family. And so, it was extremely personal for people like that live there. And talking with like their EOD techs there was interesting because the Russians did, at least they would tell us, did some really crazy stuff to them, like they put stakes in a field there, and they would put grenades, and they would run fishing line on them, and then the fishing line would hold the spoon of the grenade, and they'd pull the pin. And as soon as you walk over and you hit the line, it's a clear fishing line, you don't see it. As soon as you notice it, it falls off the spoon, and the spoon falls out, and the grenade explodes. And they showed us this how it worked, and it was pretty effective, and it was kind of crazy to see like a conventional military using very insurgency type tactics to attack and stuff. So it was interesting, and it was a really good learning experience for me, and kind of opened my view of the world up and how crazy it can be. So.
All right. So in the meantime, so you're basically back at Camp Lejeune at this point, and
yes,
and just kind of.
I'm waiting my time. Yeah, I would help train, and then once the NCOs got there that picked up for where I was going to leave them, they went on their training route, and I essentially just made sure that I was accounted for every day and did my process for checking out of the Marine Corps and made sure I set myself up for success by getting a job or going to school, stuff like that.
Now, how long had you actually enlisted for?
8 years. So you do. Usually it's 4 and 4, so you do 4 active and then 4 in the inactive reserve,
Okay.
or you can do reserve component if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
But mine, since I did 5, mine was 5 and 3. So
Okay.
technically right now I'm still part of the inactive reserve. But they, as long as you're, I mean, if you're going to school or you're doing whatever you want, you don't have to do anything for them. They don't. You're basically just, if World War III kicks off and we need everyone, you're getting called up.
All right. Now, why did you? Now, did you assume when you went in you were just going to do the one hitch and then that would be it, or did you consider staying longer?
I considered, after training the Ukrainians in Vietnam, I kind of, or not Vietnam, Ukraine, I had a lot of, I guess, motivation to kind of maybe do another enlistment. But after being in Afghanistan and kind of getting back, and some of us weren't treated so well by our unit afterwards, it kind of reminded me that, yeah, the Marine Corps will still find its way to mess you over. And so I decided, I was like, I did my time. I got what I wanted out of it. I decided I was ready to go back to school, and I think I had the motivation and the right mindset to go to college and actually pass versus going right out of high school and possibly just flunking out. And I mean, you can't really beat the GI Bill, which is a nice incentive to go in.
All right. So when do you actually get out?
I got out. I actually ended up getting out before my actual date because Hurricane Florence hit in September of 2018, and so I was supposed to get out the 16th, but the hurricane was supposed to hit like the 13th or 12th or something like that. So I ended up actually getting out about a week prior, and they were pushing people out to get them out before the storm hit. And so that's when I got out and immediately just tried to get out of Dodge because everyone was evacuating, and so I was just flying through North Carolina and West Virginia to get home.
All right. And then what did you do once you got back home?
I immediately, I moved in with my parents. I didn't have that much stuff, but so yeah, I just stayed with them. Stayed with them for about a month, and then I got my own place in downtown Grand Rapids. I got a job with Loomis Armored in Comstock Park, and then I decided that in January I was going to go back to school. And the summer prior to that, summer of 2018, I came home for leave and actually went to school, toured colleges and stuff like that. I figured out where I was going to go, and I decided on Grand Valley, and they actually offered me to come here in September. I would have started really late, and they said they could work around that somehow. But I wanted the time to kind of decompress and you know, transition a little bit and just work and kind of just enjoy the freedom that I kind of being able to do what I want when I want now. But yeah, and then in January I started school.
All right. Now, what are you majoring in?
Right now, management information systems is what I'm doing.
Okay. And you bravely signed up for an upper level history course in your first semester.
I did. I actually, when I signed up for it, the person that was my advisor was telling me, was asking me, like, "Are you sure you want to take that?" I was like, history or warfare. I was like, "I was just at the Marine Corps. Like, this is right up my alley. What do you mean?" And she was like, "It's not going to be easy." And I was like, "Well, it's college, right?" And yeah, and then getting into the class, with you speaking about it in the beginning, I kind of knew I was a little bit tougher than I was expecting, but I think overall it helped me out a lot, kind of getting into college. And
It was academic boot camp.
Yeah, it's getting into it and kind of being able to write bigger papers that I'm going to have to do later on, and kind of versus like writing 150, which is 3 5-page papers. I was writing those while I was writing the 17 pagers for this class, and I was just like, these are nothing.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess now you talked a little bit about that already. What do you think overall you sort of took out of the Marine Corps experience?
I think just a sense of purpose in life and kind of a view of life that it's not really every day is not a given type of thing, because you see around the world all over how quickly and how bad things can be very quickly, and it kind of makes you appreciate everything you have in America, where you don't have to worry about a constant war or anything like that. It just gave me a sense of purpose, and I think really kind of drives me to want to graduate and stuff like that, and kind of just always be striving for something better. And in the Marine Corps, you're always working towards your next promotion, or you're always trained to perfect, or so you can't get something wrong. And I kind of take that to my daily life, where every day you kind of try and improve in some aspect of your life. every day, whether it's just simply working out or you're doing school or working school or something like that.
Do you still see much of the people who were your friends before you left, or have they all gone off in different directions now?
A few. I think that is also one thing I did enjoy about the Marine Corps, is that it really did show me who my true friends coming out of high school were, because when you're gone, there's only so many people that really want to reach out to you and actually care about you. And I have a core group of friends here, about 5 or 6 friends that I played rugby with and was very close to in high school, and they kept tabs on me while I was gone, and even would send me stuff when I was deployed and wrote me in boot camp and stuff like that. And I'm still friends with them, and they're still around here. A lot of them have graduated now and are working and stuff like that. But a majority of the people that I knew in high school, I've never heard of from again, and don't really care to.
That can be true for a lot of us, I guess. Do you find there is sort of a gap between you and them, in the sense you've gone and done all of this stuff, or do they know enough about what you did that that gap isn't so big?
I've told them a lot about things and stuff I've experienced throughout my entire time, and I talk to them throughout the time too, so they've kind of seen me involved over the time too as well. But I don't think there's a huge gap. I think if I were to sit down and like have a conversation with a Marine and them, there's a very distinct difference in what we would joke about, what we would talk about, and things like that. But I don't feel like I can't relate to them in any way. I mean, I still feel like a normal 23-year-old, just like they're a normal 23 or 24-year-old.
Yeah. Well, hey, speaking as a professor, you seem to be highly functional. So, okay, this is a very good story, and you tell it well. So just thank you very much for taking the time to share it. All right.